It looks like our voices are finally starting to reach the people in power, and some very important pieces of legislation will be up for a vote pretty soon. Now, I've been reporting on Epstein and other vile monsters like him for a long time, and to be honest, I was starting to lose hope. However, it seems like some Republicans are finally realizing that they might not get reelected if they don't speak up now. For instance, let me just show you what Tim Burchett said in a recent interview.
I'm big on clarity and transparency, and you know, that's good reason people don't trust government, either party.
But you don't believe what the Justice Department is saying?
I don't know. You know, I don't. I don't trust them.
Now, he's a full-on Donald Trump supporter, and in the past, he's even criticized his own party for dragging their feet on certain issues.
This bunch up here is fairly gutless, Matt. We got about 100, 150 days before they start stabbing the president in the back, and that's what scares me most about this. Speaker Johnson doesn't deliver on the conservative credentials that he promised us, then I suspect we will be looking for a new speaker. That's always an option.
But this time around, it looks like he's tired of talking, because he has sent a letter to the House Oversight Committee asking them to allow him to testify in a public hearing. This is huge because it puts pressure on people like James Comer, who have been busy hunting down the people behind the AutoPen scandal. Now, even though he might have sent this letter, he's not the most influential GOP member who's asking for the truth about Epstein. That title goes to Speaker Mike Johnson, who said this on the Benny Johnson Show.
Reagan used to tell us we should trust the American people. I believe in that principle. I know President Trump does as well, and I trust him. It's a very delicate subject, but we should put everything out there and let the people decide it. Pam Bondi, I don't know, when she originally made the statement, I think she was talking about documents, as I understood it, they were on her desk. I don't know that she was specific about a list or whatever, but she needs to come forward and explain that to everybody.
Now, some people were mad at him and other Republicans for voting against an amendment that would have forced Pam Bondi to release anything the DOJ has on Epstein.
Last night, the Speaker's Rules Committee voted to block my amendment that called for the full release of the Epstein files while protecting the victim's identity. So you ask, why did they vote this way? Let's speak plainly. Because these rich and powerful men donate to the politicians in Washington, D.C., play golf with the elites in Washington, D.C., they are foreign leaders who we don't want to offend. They interact with our intelligence agencies that we don't want to disobey.
First of all, it's true that they did vote against this amendment, but let's look at the full story.
Apparently, people are saying that Republicans voted against exposing the Epstein files. That is false. Let me explain this to you. A vote on the previous question is essentially a vote that is procedural, right? And it would surrender the House of Representatives to the Democrats to control. And by the way, that means they can ram anything they want in and on the floor, including impeachments and you name it. Nobody ever in the history of the majority has ever voted on the previous question to surrender the floor to the minority party.
The real legislation that can release those files is going to come from Congressman Thomas Massie, who tweeted this: "We all deserve to know what's in the Epstein files, who's implicated, and how deep this corruption goes. Americans were promised justice and transparency. We're introducing a discharge petition to force a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives on releasing the complete files." Now, if he manages to force a vote on this issue, it will immediately tell us which members of Congress want transparency and which ones are just pretending to care about this. But one thing you gotta understand is that Congressman Massie will start collecting signatures for this discharge petition in 7 days, so make sure to tell your representative to sign, because this might be the only legal way to force their hand. Now, I don't know what's gonna happen with these legislative efforts to expose the Epstein clients. However, it's pretty clear that some of the most outspoken MAGA leaders are now opposing the president on this one issue. And speaking of President Trump, it seems like his thoughts on Epstein haven't changed much.
I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so
understand.
upset about how it's been handled? Why
I
do you
don't
think that is?
understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is.
Well, Mr. President, it's true that Epstein is dead, but from everything we know so far, he was just an agent providing extremely horrifying and sick services to some of the most powerful men on this planet. People want to know the names of these monsters so we can bring them to justice before they die of old age or are too sick to even stand trial, like Mike Jeffries. However, the president also reiterated his point about the authenticity of these files.
These files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden information. We went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through.
The problem here is that if those files were forged, why didn't the DOJ say so in that memo? Why did they act like there were no files at all? It does not make sense, and that's why even the biggest supporters of President Trump keep asking for the truth. And while the GOP keeps trying to figure out what to do, Democrats like Dick Durbin are out here giving wacky interviews like this one.
Leader Jeffries is right. Either they misled the American people with this conspiracy theory for years, or they're covering it up now. Process last week, we offered an amendment together, and the amendment said that they should preserve the evidence of the Epstein investigation and release it to the American people.
Does he think we've forgotten how he protected Bill Gates by burying the Epstein flight logs?
I'll talk to you about the Epstein case. I have worked on this for years, trying to get those records of who flew on Epstein's plane. Earlier, I urged then Chairman Durbin to subpoena those records, and I ended up being blocked by Senator Durbin and Christopher Wray. They stonewalled on this.
Now, moving on from this insane situation, I want to talk about some other stories as well. And the first thing I want to discuss is a CNN article in which they're talking about how the winter storms are going to be even more devastating than what we're seeing in this storm season. The article discusses a study focusing on nor'easters, which are basically devastating storms that hit the East Coast between September and April. The most destructive nor'easter in recent decades was called Storm of the Century, and it took 200 lives back in 1993.
East Coast, a powerful winter storm stretching to Canada. This is NBC Nightly News, reported by Garrick Utley. Good evening. It stretches for 2,100 miles from the Gulf of Mexico to New England. It's caused at least 15 deaths. Technically, it is not a hurricane, but in some areas you wouldn't know the difference. Torrential rains, heavy snow, high tides, and devastating winds.
Basically, these storms can be as deadly as a hurricane, and according to this study, we can expect the next big nor'easter to cause even more destruction than what we saw in '93. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me it looks like they're basically preparing us for a devastating storm by saying it's going to be caused by climate change. It also seems like a distraction at a time when people are asking why all of these rare weather events happened in a span of weeks. Now, of course, what CNN isn't talking about is what we are putting in our skies. Luckily, some people still know that legislation against this practice is the only way to stop it once and for all.
I have a big announcement to make. My Clear Skies Act has been filed. This is my legislation to ban weather modification and geoengineering of all kinds. Finally, we can really take the fight in Washington to protect our skies, protect our water, protect our atmospheres, and most of all, protect our families. Thanks for your support, everyone. Look for my legislation, the Clear Skies Act.
Let's keep an eye on this bill as well, because if it goes for a vote, we will know which politicians really care about Americans. Now, in the last few months, a lot of these so-called conspiracy theories have been proven correct. One such theory talks about how the government always ends up grabbing land in the aftermath of a tragedy. In Lahaina, thousands of people lost their homes, and the rebuilding effort is a joke.
It's
been a year and a half since the devastating fires wiped out over 2,000 homes in Lahaina, Maui, and as of June 2025, only 6 have been rebuilt. Let that sink in, 6 homes, after the deadliest fires in modern Hawaiian history. You'd think the response would be urgent, aggressive, unstoppable, but it's been the exact opposite. The official excuse? Permitting delays, legal hurdles, complex zoning rules. The Hawaiian Supreme Court even ruled in February 2025 to delay the release of key settlement funds. Translation? The money is there, but the people who need it still don't have it. According to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, only 800 of 1,600 properties were cleared of debris by April. Half in over a year. Meanwhile, families are still displaced. Businesses are gone. The land sitting empty. And here's what they won't say out loud. This isn't about lack of resources. It's about bureaucracy, inefficiency, and intentional gridlock. The National Institute of Standards and Technology confirms that in places like Hawaii, restrictive zoning and outdated permitting laws can delay rebuilding by 50 to 70%. So while the media says Maui strong, the reality is Maui stalled. After Helene, the governor of North Carolina just straight up asked people to sell that land.
You know, in some areas, you just shouldn't build back. And we've been able to convince certain communities and people that buyouts are better.
Then we had the LA disaster, where entire towns were decimated by fires that were started by faulty electric lines. We all know that not a lot of rebuilding has been allowed so far, but what I'm going to share today will definitely shock you. You see, right after the fire, I said they were going to change zoning laws to convert single-family homes into condos, and Gavin Newsom called me a liar. We later found out that someone in the local government was already working on such a plan.
My conversation with Mr. Giacoletti was when he talked about the possibility of, as we start rebuilding, starting to relax some of the zoning laws so that rather than putting up single-family residences, we allow developers to start putting up duplexes and apartments. In other words, increasing density.
I even told you guys that they were going to use a plan called Builder's Remedy to turn normal, thriving communities and neighborhoods into a jungle of high-rise apartments. Builder's Remedy basically allows investors to build however many high-rise buildings they want, as long as those buildings comply with California's environmental laws and have 20 of their units set aside for low-income households. And on top of this, you can build in any city that has failed to provide plans to accommodate future residential growth. This law basically compels cities to allow you to build without any zoning restrictions. And this is the most evil thing about this plan. Most families have to pay so much extra to build homes in California because of these damn zoning laws and all the other red tape. Meanwhile, these rich investors can now build without any problems whatsoever. If you haven't seen my video, go ahead and check it out because it shows how easily they can destroy healthy communities in this country. But coming back to what I was talking about, the Newsom government is now proposing a bill that will give them $101 million to create, guess what, low-income housing on fire-damaged plots of land. This legislation will basically give Newsom a free hand to impose his agenda, and it will give the developers a green light to build cheap apartment complexes. Only a small fraction of housing units in these complexes will be set aside for low-income housing, while the developer makes millions by renting the rest at California rates. It's a scary plan, and unfortunately it looks like there's no one to stop it anymore. We're gonna end today's video right there. I'm really curious to know how you feel about today's video and all the topics we discussed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and stay tuned for the next one.